For a long time, the South was laughed at, ignored, or dismissed as a joke in hip hop, but over time, the tables turned. The region was once looked at as a slow, country, and unlyrical now dominates the global rap sound. This is a story of how the South took over the rap game. Before the gold grills, the lean cups, and trap anthems that ruled the airwaves today, the South was a non-factor in hip hop. In the early days, the game was painted as a two-coast war, East Coast versus West Coast. New York was a birthplace, LA was a rebellion. The South wasn't even in the conversation. In the 80s, hip hop was viewed as a coastal sport. If you weren't part of Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, or Compton, you weren't taken seriously. And if you had a southern accent, forget about it. The South was labeled slow, country, unlyrical, and unsophisticated, just background noise to the real meccas of hip-hop. But while the mainstream slept, something was bubbling down below the Mason-Dixon line. One of the first signs of life came from Two Live Crew in Miami. Known for their raunchy bass-heavy party music, they weren't very controversial, were revolutionary. Their 1989 album, As Nasty as They Wanna Be, sparked a national legal battle over freedom of speech and music. Luther Campbell, aka Uncle Luke, took it to the courts and won. That moment didn't just empower Southern rap, it helped protect hip-hop as a whole. Meanwhile, in Houston, the Ghetto Boys were doing something entirely different. Their music was dark, ecological, and gritty. Scarface, Bushwick Bill, and Willie D gave listeners a window into Southern trauma and violence years before the world was ready to accept it. Albums like We Can't Be Stopped and Grip It on the Other Level were underground classics, but again, the industry barely acknowledged them. A major reason the South was ignored early on was because their sound didn't match what was popular. While New York emphasized boom bap, lyricism, and breakbeats, meanwhile LA focused on funk samples, gangster rap, and cinematic storytelling, the South had something else entirely different. 808s so heavy they could rattle a Chevy truck, drawled flaws, and country twang that was unapologetically regional, music made for strip clubs, car systems, and block parties, not for ladies' lounge, crowds, or MTV. This was a different culture, but in hip-hop, different often means disrespected until it wins. In Atlanta, a New York transplant named MC Shy D was one of the first rappers to gain regional traction. Around the same time, Kilo Ali was laying down electro-infused bass music that would influence the future ATL scene. And in Memphis, groups like 8 Ball and MJG were quietly carving their names into Southern history, pushing out gritty stories over soul sampling production. In New Orleans, DJ Jimmy and early bounce music were laying the foundation for what will later become Cash Money sound. Each of these acts built local movements. They didn't need national acceptance. They needed regional dominance. They threw their own shows, pressed their own vinyl, sold tapes out the trunk, and flooded the streets with their own hustle. But it wasn't enough yet. By the early 90s, the South was still seen as an underdog. It was a third coast, overlooked, underestimated, and unrepresented. But as we soon learned, they weren't waiting for a seat at the table. They were building their own throne. While the East and the West were battling for hip-hop supremacy, the South was building in silence. Local legends were becoming hometown heroes, and by the mid-1990s, the Southern sound was beginning to rise from the underground. Slowly but surely, the world started to listen. It's one of the most infamous nights in hip-hop history, the 1995 Source Awards in Madison Square Garden. The tension between the East and the West was at an all-time high. Suge Knight called a Puff Daddy, Snoop Dogg got booed off stage, but the real spark came from a group that didn't belong to either coast. When OutKast won Best New Artist, they were booed as they took the stage. Andre 3000, dressed in a baggy pants and dreads, stood in front of the crowd of New York and said,
"But it's like this, the South got something to say. That's all I got to say." Yeah.
The group OutKast, made of Andre 3000 and Big Boy, wasn't just another rap act. They were the artistic awakening of the South. Their debut album, Southern Playlistic Cadillac Music, fused Parliament, Funkadelic grooves with street poetry and country swagger. But it was their next albums, 80 Aliens and Aquemini, that showed the world something truly different. Futuristic production, spiritual themes, lyrical depth, and a refusal to imitate anyone. They were backed by Organized Noise, a visionary production team responsible for the sound of the Dungeon Family. With them came other acts like Goody Mob. 1995, they dropped their debut album, Soul Food, that introduced the world to a new kind of conscious Southern rap, political, poetic, and grounded in Southern black life. Together, they redefined what Atlanta could be in hip-hop, not just a party scene, but a creative epicenter. While Atlanta was bringing innovation and artistry, Houston was building an entire different wave. Deep in Texas, a quiet revolution was happening, one chop and a screwed beat at a time. The late legendary DJ Screw was reimagining how music sounded by slowing down songs, doubling hooks, repeating phrases, and dragging vocals into syrupy territory. He created a vibe that matched the city's lean-soaked, slow-motion culture. His Screw tapes became underground classics, shared and duplicated across the South. Out of this scene emerged the Screwed Up Clique, and further into the mainstream came the duo UGK, consisted of Pimp C and Bun B. Their music was gritty and bluesy, filled with southern pride and street gospel. Pimp C played the preacher. Bun B was professor. UGK's 1996 debut album, Riding Dirty, became a southern classic without major radio play or video rotation. Proof that the streets were listening, even if the music industry wasn't. Further east, Memphis was becoming a breeding ground for hardcore, sinister rap music. While the East had Wu-Tang and the West had Death Row, Memphis had something even darker, 3-6 Mafia, formed in the early 1990s by DJ Paul, Juicy J, and Lord Infamous. 3-6 Mafia brought eerie, hardcore sounds, trunk rattling bass, and chants that felt more like cult rituals than a rap record. They rapped about demons, death, violence, and drugs with an energy that felt dangerously authentic. They were ahead of their time, laying the groundwork for the trap, drill, and goth rap styles we hear today. Though they didn't get national respect yet, their music was still everywhere in the South, in parking lots, in strip clubs, in car stereos. Their influence were growing without the mainstream even noticing. By the mid-1990s, the South wasn't just present, it was finding its voice. Each city had its own sound. Atlanta was soulful, futuristic, and lyrical. Houston was more slowed down, heavy, blues influence. Memphis was dark, aggressive, and cult-like, while New Orleans were bouncy, party-driven, and raw. They weren't copying East or West. They were creating their own lane. And even though the industry still looked down on the South, fans on the ground already knew something special was happening. The foundation was set. In the late 1990s, the South had found its voice, but it still didn't have a seat at the table. That's when the South did something genius. It stopped asking for one. Instead, it built its own, and it started with infrastructure. While the coast had access to major labels, established press, and radio relationships, the South had to do it themselves. That meant forming their own labels, pressing their own CDs, building their own street teams, and turning independent hustle to empires. This wasn't just about music. It was about ownership, branding, and business. No one changed the South industry landscape more than Master P. Born in New Orleans but raised in Parley and Richmond, California, Percy Miller studied the independent game like a general. In 1991, he launched No Limit Records, and by the mid-1990s, he had built an absolute machine. Master P wasn't just a rapper. He was a businessman, executive, director, and marketer. No Limit put out dozens of albums a year with the same visual branding, pen and pixel artwork, tanks and soldiers, gold and platinum themes. Even if you didn't own the artist, you knew it was No Limit. Key moves like this, it was distributed through Priority Records while owning his masters, a move that gave him a larger cut of the profits than any rapper had seen at the time. Signed talent like Silk the Shocker, C Murder, Mia X, Mystical, Fiend, Soulja Slim, and more. Ghetto D's 1997 album and P, The Last Dawn, which released in 1998, were certified platinum, proving the South could sell big without New York or LA. Master P wasn't just feeding his city, he was feeding generations. While No Limit was flooding the streets, another label from New Orleans was crafting a tighter, younger, and more cohesive crew. That label was Cash Money Records. Founded by brothers Brian Birdman Williams and Ronald Slim Williams, Cash Money became the flashier, more youthful counterpart to No Limit. Their key signing was a teenage phenom named Lil Wayne. Along with Juvenile, BG, and Turk, they formed the Hot Boys, and their energy was unmatched. Juvenile's album 400 Degrees, which released in 1998, exploded, led by the Manny Fresh produced hit Ha, a song with no traditional hook and a bounce style that confused New York DJs but still took over the South. Then came Back That Ass Up, a worldwide hit. 1998, Cash Money signed a $30 million pressing and distribution deal with Universal Records. They kept 85 of their royalties. They owned their masters. It was one of the best deals in hip-hop history, and they did it on their own terms. Manny Fresh Productions, Birdman's Business Mind, and Lil Wayne's star power created a legacy that would dominate the next 2 decades. Next is Rap-A-Lot Records. Down in Texas, Jay Prince had already built something legendary. Rap-A-Lot Records, founded in the late 80s, was the first successful Southern label to demand national attention, with groups like the Ghetto Boys, Scarface, Devin the Dude, and later Zero and Trey. Rap-A-Lot laid down Houston's blueprint. Jay Prince didn't just promote artists, he protected them. He kept the label independent and negotiated with major labels on his own terms. To this day, he's seen as the godfather of Southern hip-hop business. Tony Draper's Suave House Records might be the most underrated piece of the puzzle. Based in Houston, but heavily tied to Memphis, talent like 8-Ball and MJG, Suave House delivered street anthems filled with storytelling, soul samples, and grit. Albums like Coming Out Hard and On Top of the World quietly laid the foundation of what trap music would become. Tales from the Trap before we even called it that. Suave didn't just blow up like Cash Money, but their influence on Southern lyricism and soul was massive. East Coast rappers were worried about radio play. The South was selling records out the trunk. Southern artists focused on volume, local control, and grassroots support. They performed at strip clubs, gas stations, and skating rinks. They passed out flyers, burned CDs, and built word-of-mouth like movement. Mixtape circuits and mom-and-pop record stores kept the culture alive. This independent spirit created loyal fan bases that didn't rely on MTV or the source. They were building communities, not just selling music. By the early 2000s, the South had built something undeniable, created labels, and owned their masters. Artists didn't need no co-signs from other artists. Producers created entirely new sounds, and fans brought music before it hit radio. This was the moment the South stopped being a region and became an empire. The world hadn't caught on yet, but the infrastructure was there. The army was built. The sound that was once ridiculed was now on the verge of revolutionizing the genre. By the early 2000s, the South had laid the groundwork. Labels, fan bases, and artists who could stand on their own. But now it was time for something bigger. Now the sound wasn't just Southern, it was mainstream. The South wasn't knocking on the door, it was kicking off the hinges. This chapter is where the sound of the South becomes the sound of rap. Crunk, trap, and snap were more than styles. They were cultural movements that took over clubs, radios, and eventually the entire industry. Trap was about hustling, crunk was about fighting. Crunk wasn't subtle. It wasn't about metaphors or storytelling. It was about energy, volume, and turning up until the walls sweat. Little John, the king of crunk. Little John and the East Side Boys took the aggressive chant-driven energy of Southern clubs and turned it into a national wave. Hits like Get Low, Bia, Throw It Up, and What You Gonna Do were club warfare. The beats were simple, booming 808s, synth stabs, chants, and repetitive hooks made to yell back. Crunk was designed for clubs, strip joints, and fights. Mosh pits in the South weren't punk, they were crunk. You didn't dance to crunk, you fought to crunk. You lost your mind to crunk. It made its way to the charts with Usher's Yeah in 2004, produced by Lil Jon and featuring Ludacris, a crunk pop crossover that went #1 in 20 plus countries. That was the South going global. Next is 3 6 Mafia, Crunk's dark cousins. While Lil Jon brought crunk to the clubs, 3 6 Mafia brought it to the underworld. Songs like Tear the Club Up, Who Run It, and Slobber My Knob were anthems in Southern trap houses and gyms before they hit the airwaves. By 2005, 3 6 Mafia had won an Oscar for its Out Here for a Pimp. The industry couldn't ignore them anymore. Next is trap. The street gospel evolves. Trap wasn't just a sound. It was a location, a lifestyle, a survival strategy. In the early 2000s, trap music emerged as a distinct genre out of Atlanta. Raw, haunting, and cinematic. T.I., the self-proclaimed king of the South. In 2003, T.I. dropped trap music, and Rubber Band Man became a Southern anthem. He introduced the term trap music to the mainstream, defining it all as the voice of a hustler. T.I. rapped about the psychology of the grind. It was introspective, but still flex heavy and aggressive. Young Jeezy, the motivational speaker of the trap. In 2005, Jeezy dropped Thug Motivation 101, and everything changed. His raspy motivational tone made trap feel heroic. Songs like Soul Survivor, Go Crazy, and Trap or Die became anthems of ambition and survival. Jeezy was the cold realism of the streets, rapping like he had seen it all and made it out. Gucci Mane, the mixtape king. While T.I. and Jeezy were gaining mainstream love, Gucci Mane was flooding the streets with mixtapes. Gucci dropped dozens of projects from 2005 onward, creating his own ecosystem of fans and collaborators. His flow wasn't orthodox, his delivery offbeat, but it worked. He became a trap icon, and his ear for talent would shape the next generation. If Jeezy could rap Preacher, Gucci was a trap prophet. Trap spoke to the streets, Snap spoke to the kids. In the mid-2000s, Atlanta struck again, this time with a style that critics called too simple, but fans couldn't resist. Them franchise boys, D4L and Soulja Boy, Snap music had Spears beats, finger snaps instead of snares, simple, chantable hooks, dances that spread like wildfire. Hits like Lean With It, Rock With It, and Laffy Taffy took over BET's 106 and Park and flooded teen parties across America. Then Soulja Boy came out, the internet kid who broke all the rules. In 2007, Crank That Soulja Boy exploded thanks to YouTube, LimeWire, and MySpace. No major label, no industry cosign, just the power of the internet and a smart teenager. He cracked the code, and the industry will never be the same again. Snap music was short-lived, but his DNA runs through TikTok, meme rap, and viral dances today. By the end of the 2000s, the South had created 3 different revolutions in rap: crunk music, trap, and snap. Each of these sounds became cultural exports. East Coast rappers started saying yeah, like Lil Jon. West Coast artists started jumping on trap beats. Even New York clubs started playing crunk and snap music nightly. The rest of the country stopped laughing and started imitating. What started as a regional movement became the national standard. Crunk made you wild, trap made you grind, snap made you dance, and they all made you listen. Trap music wasn't just a sound anymore. It became the foundation of hip-hop. And by the end of 2000s, it was clear. Trap was evolving, expanding, and taking over the world. The street-born style that once lived in Atlanta's dope houses and basements now became a global phenomenon. And the mixtape era was a fuel that lit the fire. Before Spotify and Apple Music, there was a Dat Piff, live mixtapes, my mixtapes, and burnt CDs from the corner stores. Trap artists realized something key. You don't need a major label to win. You need output. Nobody embraces more than Gucci Mane and Future. Gucci Mane, the trap general. Between 2008 and 2013, Gucci dropped an absurd number of projects: Rider on the Wall, Chicken Talk, Bird Print, Trap God, and many more. He built an empire without radio, TV, or a label push. Every street in Atlanta knew him. Every trap house had him on repeat. He introduced and co-signed future legends like Young Thug, Migos, Pee Wee Longway, Waka Flocka, Metro Boomin, Zaytoven, and more. Gucci Mane wasn't just an artist, he was a pipeline. If you came through Gucci, you were stamped. Future, the codeine poet. In 2011, a raspy-voiced melodic artist emerged out of Atlanta's dungeon family lineage. Future combined Gucci Mane's work ethic, T-Pain's auto-tune influence, and Trap's emotional weight. His mixtapes, Dirty Sprite, True Story, Astronaut Status, built a cult following, but it was his 2014-2015 run that turned him into a legend. Monster, Beast Mode, 56 Nights, DS2, Dirty Sprite 2, What a Time to Be Alive with Drake. Future made trap melodic and cinematic. He rapped like a man drowning in fame, drugs, and heartbreak. It was toxic, it was beautiful, and it dominated. Trap's evolution wasn't just rappers, it was about producers. Lex Luger was one of the founding fathers of the trap sound. His beats on Waka Flocka's Harder Than Pain and Rick Ross's BMF brought movie-level intensity to the streets. Jay-Z and Kanye even borrowed his style for Watch the Throne's HAM. Metro Boomin became one of the most sought-after producers in the game. Subtle, haunting, polished. Metro made beats that were dark but clean. Collaborated with Future, 21 Savage, Travis Scott, and The Weeknd. His iconic tag, If Your Metro Don't Trust You, became part of pop culture. Zaytoven, Trap's church organ, played like a gospel pianist in a crack house. His chemistry with Gucci wasn't a match, brought live instrumentation and southern soul to trap. This new era of production wasn't rough around the edges, it was refined. Trap became cinematic, and everyone wanted it in. The biggest artists in the world started using the trap as their canvases. Beyonce's Formation had trap gems. Drake's If You're Reading This Is Too Late leaned heavy into Atlanta sounds. Migos' Triplet Flow became the default flow for rappers across the globe. Even pop stars like Rihanna Grande and Justin Bieber tapped trap styles production for hits. At this point, trap wasn't regional, it was global pop music with street roots. Migos, the flow architects, Raindrop, Drop Top. With one line, Migos flipped the rap world. Their 2013 single, Versace, especially with the Drake remix, introduced their triplet flow to the mainstream, a flow that sounded like rapid fire. Stir fly, bird fly, third eye, word guy. Critics once mocked it, then everyone started doing it. By 2017, Bad and Bougie went #1. Migos had conquered radio, memes, fashion, and festival stages, all from North Atlanta's 21 Savage. Deadpan, monotone, cold realism. He rapped like someone who had nothing to prove. NBA Youngboy. Baton Rouge prolific, pain-filled prophet. Millions of streams, no radio, just loyalty. Kodak Black. Florida's troubled genius, deep pain behind every line. These artists reminded the world trap is still rooted in struggle and survival, and pain turned into poetry. As the 2010s rolled on, mixtapes became albums, and SoundCloud turned nobodies into stars overnight. But the formula stayed the same. Heavy 808s. Decades, New York was the birthplace. LA was rebellion. But by the 2010s, a quiet truth had become impossible to ignore. Atlanta wasn't just a part of the conversation anymore. It was the conversation. The South hadn't just taken over. Atlanta became the new capital for hip-hop. From fashion to slang, flows to beats, Atlanta wasn't just setting trends. It was manufacturing the future in real time. Number one, infrastructure. Atlanta had everything a rising artist needed. Independent labels, top-tier producers, recording studios like Patchwork, Stankonia, and Tree Sound, video directors like Moshe Family and Key Motion, media hubs like Worldstar, Say Cheese, DJ Smalls, and Vlad TV filming interviews weekly. Atlanta became self-sufficient. You could blow up without leaving the city. Number two, style and sound diversity. Atlanta didn't have one sound, it had every sound. Crunk, trap, experimental, auto-tune melodies, mainstream pop rap crossovers. If New York had the blueprint, Atlanta had a playground. Number three, artist ecosystem. Atlanta wasn't competitive like other cities. It was collaborative. You'd hear Future on a Thug track, Thug co-signing Gunna, Gunna mentoring Lil Baby, Baby featuring on the 21 Savage single, 21 working with Metro, and the rest of the new wave. Everyone helped each other win. No artist represented Atlanta's evolution more than Lil Baby. Came from the same streets as Young Thug and Pee Wee Longway. Released harder than ever, Street Gossip, and My Turn, a commercial and critical breakthrough. In 2020, The Bigger Picture became the anthem of the George Floyd protest, showcasing Baby's death beyond trap talk. He started as a hustler and became a leader. Lil Baby's rise proved that you could come from the bottom of Atlanta and still be accepted on CNN and Billboard at the same time. Atlanta's influence stretched far beyond just sound. Fashion, skinny jeans, rockstar aesthetics, iced-out chains, skate culture, Thug and Gunna made nail polish, purses, and tight pants hood acceptable. Slang like cap, no cap, drip, slat, push and pee, skirt, who you with. Atlanta created the new lingo of the new generation. They also created dances from the nene to the dab to the milli rock to the whip. ATL Kids went viral before TikTok even existed, and the production styles, even UK and African drill artists adapted Atlanta-style beats. Latin trap and K-pop began fusing trap jumps together with international flair. Atlanta wasn't just dominating music, it became a media capital. Tyler Perry Studios, Donald Glover's Atlanta won Emmys and Grammys. The city became home to Love and Hip Hop, Revolt TV, and hundreds of music videos monthly. Atlanta became the Black Hollywood, where you could film, record, perform, and build the empire all in one city. So why Atlanta? Why not Memphis? Why not Houston or Miami? Here's the truth. Atlanta had structure and chaos, a perfect blend of hustle and creativity. The streets respected the music, and the industry respected the streets. It was a city where every sound was allowed, every style could work, and no artist has to fit a mold. It became the true hip-hop capital of the 21st century. Remember when Andre 3000 stood on stage at the Source Awards in 1995 and said, "The South got something to say"? Now look, Atlanta said it, Atlanta shouted it, and Atlanta never stopped speaking.